My father froze at the airport when a man in a Navy suit handed him a thick envelope with my name printed across it. Derek, my brother, stood beside him, pale, pretending it wasn't happening. 4 days earlier, they'd laughed while I walked out of my mother's dining room after my brother said, "You're not part of the family. Don't show up." I didn't shout. I just left. And now here we were, their world unraveling exactly the way they'd designed mine to. Before I tell you what really happened that night, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Have you ever drawn a line with family and refused to erase it? I remember that Sunday like it was supposed to mean something. My mother called it family dinner the way she always did, as if the word alone could fix the cracks. I spent half the afternoon in my apartment kitchen layering lasagna, brushing garlic butter over bread, choosing a bottle of Merlot I couldn't really afford. It wasn't about the food. It was my peace offering, my proof that I still cared enough to show up. Their house smelled like cinnamon candles and old photographs too sweet, too staged. The laughter I heard from the doorway died the second I walked in. My father looked up from his phone, nodded once. My mother smiled the way she smiled at polite neighbors. Derek. My brother had his arm thrown over the back of his chair, bragging about his new business deal, the one I'd quietly kept afloat 3 times already. I set my dishes down, the steam fogging the plastic table runner, and waited for someone to make room. No one did. Dinner unfolded like it always did, chaotic, loud a performance with no audience for me. They talked about the upcoming family reunion in spring, tossing dates and hotel names around as if I wasn't sitting right there. I listened, nodding, where I was supposed to, heart pounding harder than it should have. I didn't want an invitation. I just wanted acknowledgement. When the conversation paused, I smiled and said as evenly as I could, "Just tell me when the reunion is. I'll book early this time." The words hung in the air for a second too long, then fell flat. My mother's fork scraped her plate. Derek didn't look up. My father cleared his throat and asked if anyone wanted more bread. I should have been used to it by then, the way they erased me in plain sight, but something about that moment made the air feel thinner, sharper. Maybe it was the effort behind my calm voice or the way my mother refused to meet my eyes. Maybe I was finally old enough to recognize cruelty when it wore manners. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat back watching the scene play out like I wasn't in it. The golden child and his audience. The mother keeping peace through silence. The father measuring control in tone. I told myself to breathe, to not ruin another Sunday, but a part of me already knew peace that depends on silence isn't peace. It's training for surrender. That was the last Sunday I tried to earn my place at their table. The pause after my question felt endless, and then Derek finally looked up. He leaned back in his chair, that smug half grin he always used when he wanted to land a punch without moving his hands. "You're not part of the family," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't show up." No one gasped. No one told him to stop. The room didn't explode, it caved in. My mother pressed her napkin to her lips, trying not to smile. My father slapped the table once, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. The noise filled the room, sharp and tinny, bouncing off the walls. The table erupted in laughter. I remember thinking how strange it was that a sound could hurt more than words. I stared at the lasagna I'd made, steam still rising, the cheese bubbling like it belonged to someone else. I could feel heat crawl up my neck, not from anger, but from the shame of realizing how easily they'd rehearsed this scene without me knowing. I didn't say a word. I set down my glass, folded my napkin, and pushed the chair back slowly enough to make them uncomfortable. Derek smirked. "Oh, come on, Jenny, can't you take a joke?" I met his eyes for the first time that night. "You meant it?" I said softly. He didn't deny it. None of them did. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. My mother's voice trailed after me, thin, polite, useless. "Jenny, stay. It's just dinner." "No," I said, sliding my arms into my sleeves. "It's a message." I got it. The air outside was freezing, the kind that stings your eyes. Behind me, the laughter started again, muffled through the door as if they couldn't bear even a minute of quiet. I stood on the porch for a long second, breathing in cold air until my chest stopped shaking. Then I walked to my car, lasagna untouched, still steaming in my hands. There's a kind of silence that doesn't beg for explanation. It announces its own ending. I didn't slam the door or cry on the way home. I just drove through the dark suburbs, headlights slicing through fog, thinking one clear thought that repeated like a heartbeat. This is the last time I try to belong somewhere that laughs when I bleed. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting through my blinds, the kind that makes dust look like snow. My phone lay face down on the counter. No calls, no messages, no apology. The silence was louder than anything they could have said. I made coffee, sat by the window, and tried to convince myself that peace felt like this empty, but calm. But peace isn't quiet when it's built on avoidance. It's just waiting for the next wound. By the second day, the calm turned brittle. I checked my phone once, then twice. Nothing. They hadn't even noticed I was gone. Or maybe they had, and that was the point. On the third night, I left my phone in another room and told myself I was done caring. On the fourth day, my phone finally buzzed. I stared at the screen for a long second before opening the message. Derek, hey. Weird question, did your bank block the transfer? The loan payment didn't go through. No greeting, no sorry, no mention of the dinner, just business straight to the wallet. I read it twice. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then typed 4 words that felt like they'd been waiting years to exist. Me, not family, not funded. Then I blocked his number. I thought my hands would shake, but they didn't. Instead, a strange calm spread through me. The kind that comes right before a storm, except this time, the storm wasn't mine to weather. An hour later, another text appeared, this time from my father. I didn't open it. I just flipped the phone over and let it buzz against the table until it stopped. The only sound left was the low hum of the refrigerator, steady and uncaring. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by old bank statements, receipts, transfer records. Years of emergencies that always had Derek's name attached. The amounts blurred together, 200 here, 500 there, 1,000, when his business almost failed. My stomach turned. The pattern was clear. My generosity had become their safety net and their weapon. I pulled a yellow highlighter across each transaction, watching the paper glow under the lamp. Every mark was a bruise proof of how long I'd been funding their comfort at the expense of my sanity. When I was done, I stacked the papers neatly and whispered to no one. That's over now. Outside, rain started to fall against the glass. For once, it didn't sound lonely. The next day, my phone stayed quiet. No calls, no laughter, no Derek. But I knew how this worked. People who feed on you panic when you stop bleeding. By evening, I heard the first knock on my door. Then another. Harder this time. I didn't move. Through the peephole, I saw the shape of my father's shoulders, Derek's temper pacing beside him. Their rhythm matched. It's the pounding, steady, entitled, demanding. I wrapped both hands around a cup of tea and stood in the center of my apartment, heart steady. They pounded until my picture frames rattled. I didn't answer. I just listened until the sound faded, replaced by the hum of their SUV pulling away. That's when I understood silence is a mirror. It shows people exactly who they are when they can't use you anymore. When the night finally settled, I looked at the stack of highlighted papers on my table and smiled, not the happy kind, but the kind that knows something irreversible has begun. 4 days ago, I left their house with nothing. Tonight I had something better, boundaries that couldn't be refunded. 3 days later, the envelope showed up at my door. Plain white, my name scrawled in my father's careful handwriting. Inside, $400 in 20s. No note, just cash, a guilt payment, a hush fee. I stared at it for a long time, then slid it under the table and let it sit there until sunset. When the light turned orange, I picked it up and dropped it in the trash. That small sound, the soft thud of bills hitting plastic, felt cleaner than any apology could. An hour later, my phone buzzed. My father's name lit the screen. I answered on the 4th ring. Why, I said before he could speak. He sighed, the practiced kind of sigh that meant I'm about to justify something cruel. The loan payment failed, he said quickly. It's a mess. Late fees, supplier issues, we just needed a few days' grace. It's not like we used you, Jenny. Don't take it personally. I laughed once. Quiet, sharp. That's the problem. You never did. He said my name again, softer, like that could fix it. I hung up. After that call, I stopped pretending this was about money. It wasn't. It was about ownership. They'd built a world where my worth depended on what I gave, Now they were watching it collapse. That night, I opened my banking app. Every emergency transfer, every Venmo, every favor that somehow became a debt. $20,000 over 2 years. I printed every statement until the printer whined in protest. Then I highlighted every transaction tied to Derek. When I was done, the stack glowed yellow, bright enough to see the pattern clearly. The next morning, I packed it all into a manila envelope, wrote on the front, "This is who I've been. Ask yourself who you've been." I dropped it in the post office box and didn't pay for tracking. If it got lost, that meant it had already done its job. By that afternoon, their calls doubled. My mother left voicemails full of tremors that sounded rehearsed. "Things got out of hand, sweetheart. Come for lunch, we'll talk." Then another at midnight, "Family gets through things, Jenny. Derek's under so much pressure. 4 mentions of family in 1 minute, like a spell." On the 5th day, an email came. Subject: repayment plan. It was a spreadsheet, color-coded, ridiculous. Derek listed amounts he might start paying back next year. At the bottom, he wrote, "Let's move past this. We're family, right?" I stared at the word family until it blurred. That's when the call came from a number I didn't know. "Miss William," a calm male voice. "Thomas Reed Greenlight Legal. We're confirming your co-signature on a $10,000 business loan for Derek William." My pulse stopped. "Excuse me. It appears your signature's on the document," he said. "We're verifying before processing. I never signed anything." A pause. "We've noticed inconsistencies. You won't be held liable. We'll be in touch." When the call ended, I just sat there staring at the wall. My hands trembled not from fear, but from clarity. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd taken my name. I called a lawyer I knew from work, Ms. Parson. Her voice was steady, sharp. "This isn't misunderstanding," she said. "It's identity fraud. Stay calm. Document everything. We'll handle it quietly." That word quietly made sense. People like them thrived on chaos. Silence was how you beat them. So I documented everything. Every voicemail, every forged bill, every payment I'd made in good faith. I labeled the folder paper cut small wounds that finally bled the truth. The next morning, my lawyer sent the cease and desist letter to Derek's business address. 2 hours later, I got an email from him. "You think you're better than us now? You'll regret this." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to Grandma's cottage, the only place that ever felt safe. She opened the door before I knocked. "Took you long enough," she said. Her voice didn't need to ask what happened. When I told her everything, the dinner, the forgery, the threats, she didn't flinch. "They'll always take you for granted if you stay on the ground," she said, pouring tea. "Stand up and they'll call you tall like it's an insult." Outside, rain started again. "What should I do?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes steady. "You already did it." 2 weeks later, my father and Derek stood in the middle of the airport, their perfect world unraveling, when a man in a Navy suit handed them a thick envelope. With my name across it, summons, official, and final. I wasn't there to see it, but Ms. Parson texted me one line that said, "Enough. They've been served." I stared at the message, feeling nothing like victory, nothing like guilt. Just the quiet relief of someone who finally turned the lights on in a dark room. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone a single thing. When the dust finally settled, the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. The legal mess untangled exactly the way it should have. Derek's fake loan was voided. His business accounts frozen. My father tried to argue, but every lie left a trail of paper with his signature on it. Ms. Parson handled it all with surgical calm. She didn't gloat, and neither did I. Justice doesn't need applause, it just needs to work. I didn't check on them after that. I didn't have to. News traveled through whispers. Derek's business collapsed. My father's credit ruined my mother, avoiding neighbors who finally stopped believing her misunderstood family stories. One night, my mother called. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me, the part that still remembered her hands braiding my hair, made me answer. Her voice was softer this time, stripped of performance. "I'm sorry, Jenny," she said, voice breaking, "for all of it, for not protecting you, for letting them use you." I didn't cry. I just listened. When she asked if I'd come to the reunion, I said, "No, Mom. I can forgive you from here." She didn't argue, just whispered, "I love you," and hung up. That night, I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket that smelled like rain. The city lights flickered below, steady and uncaring. I looked at the envelope of receipts on my table, the proof of everything, and slipped it into a drawer. Some truths don't need to be revisited. They just need to exist. I made tea, turned off my phone, and breathed. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like something I had to buy. It felt like something I'd built with silence boundaries and the courage to stop bleeding for people who never noticed the wound. I used to think peace meant everyone getting along. Now I know it means walking away and still wishing them well. My family's reunion went on without me, their table perfectly set, except for one empty chair in the middle. That space said everything I never had to. If you've ever had to choose yourself over people who kept taking, I hope this reminds you, silence isn't weakness, it's recovery. Thank you for listening to my story. Tell me where you're watching from and if you've ever had to draw a line with family. Your stories keep this space honest. And don't forget to hit subscribe. There's more truth where this came from.
"You're embarrassing me in front of my friends," he said loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. That was the moment something inside me cracked. My name is Vivian Deshotel, and I'm 31 years old. A year ago, I thought I had my life figured out. Steady job, stable relationship, a sense of direction. I was the kind of woman who believed in showing up for people no matter how messy they got, especially when I loved them. I grew up in a family where reliability was currency. My mother used to say, "If you love someone, you stay. You fix what's broken." I carried that into every part of my life, work, friendships, relationships, especially with Cody. Cody was 26 when we met at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was light laughter, energy music, that kind of person who filled the silence just by existing. He worked in marketing, handling event promotions for brands I'd only seen on billboards. Always on the move, always buzzing. I was quieter, a logistics coordinator at a shipping firm. My life revolved around schedules, spreadsheets, and structure. Opposites, people said. Maybe that was the appeal. In the early days, he'd drag me to rooftop parties and small gigs downtown where lights pulsed and bass drowned out the noise in my head. I'd sip soda and smile while he danced with friends, his joy intoxicating. It was chaotic, but it made me feel alive. He used to lean in after the music died and say, "You keep me grounded, Elle. You're my calm in the storm." I believed him. I built my life around being that calm. But calm gets mistaken for dull, and stability for control. Over time, Cody's job demanded more late nights. "Networking," he said. I didn't question it. Everyone needs space, right? Until that space felt like a canyon. He'd come home past midnight, smelling faintly of smoke and something floral perfume that wasn't mine. His phone buzzed with messages he'd flip over before I could glance. Clients, he'd say, with a smile too casual to be honest. I convinced myself not to nag. I was the mature one, the grounded one. He'd get tired of that lifestyle come home to me. He didn't. It all came to a head one Friday night. I remember the exhaustion pressing on my shoulders after a brutal week at work. Cody texted around 8 p.m. Out with the crew at Harbor Bar. "Can you pick me up later? Love you." Even then I said yes, because that's what I did, showed up. By midnight, I was driving through the city lights yawning, trying to ignore the ache behind my eyes. The bar was glowing in neon blues and pinks, laughter spilling onto the street. I parked, walked in, and immediately spotted him center table surrounded by his usual crowd. And her, Layla. I recognized her from one of his event photos, a colleague younger. Bold. She was laughing too loudly, leaning too close, her hand brushing his shoulder. He didn't pull away. For a moment, I froze. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was humiliated before it even shattered. Still, I smiled, walked over, and gently said, "Hey, it's getting late. Ready to head home?" He barely looked at me. "Not yet, babe. We're just talking." "Cody, it's past midnight. You have work in the morning." That's when he turned, his voice rising with a smirk. "God, Vivian, you're always the responsible one. Can't you just relax for once?" His friends laughed nervously. Layla sipped her drink, eyes flicking between us like it was entertainment. I felt the heat rise in my chest. "I'm not trying to ruin your fun, Cody. You asked me to pick you up." He rolled his eyes and said it, the sentence that still stings when I replay it in my head. "You're embarrassing me in front of my friends." The table went silent. Even the music seemed to fade. Embarrassing him. After 4 years of being his anchor, after covering his rent when he was between jobs, driving him home drunk, cheering him through failures he never took seriously. I forced a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll wait outside. But he wasn't done. No, let's talk about it now. Everyone already knows how controlling you are. Layla shifted in her seat. Cody, maybe chill. He waved her off. No, she needs to hear this. You're like a mom, always nagging. You suck the fun out of everything. Maybe I need someone who doesn't make me feel like a kid being scolded. There it was, the kill shot. I could have argued, could have cried, but I just looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Immature, selfish a man, mistaking chaos for freedom. Okay, I said softly. Then you're free. I turned and walked out, every step heavier than the last. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes following me, pitying, curious, relieved it wasn't them. Outside, the night was colder than I remembered. The sound of laughter echoed faintly from the bar, mocking me. I sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles whitened. Tears didn't come, just silence. When I finally drove home, the streets blurred, under streaks of orange light. My reflection in the window looked foreign eyes, dull mouth pressed thin. Inside my apartment, everything felt too clean, too still. I poured a glass of water, stared at it for a long time, then whispered to myself, "You're not boring. You're just tired of being the only adult in the room." I crawled into bed without changing clothes, smelling faintly of smoke and humiliation. As I lay there, the replay looped in my head, his tone, his smirk, Layla's half-sympathetic glance. Each detail cut deeper than the last. But beneath the pain, something else flickered. Anger, quiet and steady. Because love shouldn't make you feel small. And if being calm meant being invisible to him, then maybe it was time I learned to be calm for myself. Outside, somewhere across town, Cody was probably laughing, telling his side of the story. But for the first time in years, I didn't want to hear it. The silence was brutal, but it was mine. The next morning, the sunlight slicing through my curtains felt cruel. I'd barely slept, my head aching from replaying every second of that night. The humiliation, the calm I'd forced, the silence afterward. Around noon, the front door opened. I froze, half expecting it to be a dream, but there he was. Cody, sunglasses on, smelling faintly of stale liquor and expensive perfume that wasn't mine. He didn't even look guilty. "Vivian," he said, like nothing had happened. "I just came to grab some stuff." I stared at him from the kitchen table, coffee gone cold in front of me. "So that's it." He shrugged, the kind of shrug that says this was inevitable. "You were right. It's better we end it. I've been seeing Layla for a few weeks now. We just click. She's fun, spontaneous. You're safe, but safe is boring." There it was again. That word. Boring. I didn't say anything. The only sound was his duffel bag zipper scratching the silence as he threw clothes inside. He kept talking like he needed to justify betrayal by calling it self-discovery. "It started as flirting," he continued. "You were always tired, busy with work routines, rules. I felt trapped. Layla gets me." I let him talk until his words became static. My heart was breaking, yes, but under the hurt was a strange clarity. This wasn't my fault. I didn't make him cheat. I just made it too easy for him to lean while never learning to stand. When he finally paused, I said quietly, "Take what you need. I'll handle the lease later." He stopped, probably expecting tears, yelling something. When I didn't give it to him, his jaw tightened. "Don't act like the victim, Vivian. You pushed me away." I didn't respond. I simply turned my mug in my hands, watching the steam fade. At the door, he hesitated. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Don't call me," he muttered. "This is better for both of us." And then he left. The door clicked shut. The sound was so final it rang in my ears. I sat there for hours, staring at the half-packed shelf he'd left behind. A few shirts, a photo of us at a beach 3 summers ago, me laughing, his arm around me. I turned it face down. By sunset, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fall apart in the ruins of his choices. If he wanted chaos, he could keep it. I stood, took a deep breath, and started moving. First, I changed the locks. It wasn't spite, it was survival. Then I boxed up the rest of his things and left them with Mara, a mutual friend who'd always warned me he loves the chase more than the catch. I sent one final message. "Your stuff's with Mara. Take care of yourself." Then I blocked his number. The silence that followed was brutal. Days stretched like cold marble. Every room in the apartment echoed with what used to be us. But the silence was also clean. It didn't lie. It didn't charm. It didn't betray. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, staying late, volunteering for extra shifts. My boss noticed, even called me the most reliable person in the department. Funny Cody used to say that too, but with a sneer instead of respect. Evenings were the hardest. I'd cook too much food, then push it around the plate. Sometimes I'd play music, but every song reminded me of some moment, his laugh, his cologne, the way he'd rest his chin on my shoulder while I worked. So I started going to the gym. At first, I hated it, the mirrors, the noise, the fake cheer of trainers. But there was something cleansing about sweating through pain instead of crying through it. The weights didn't lie either. They gave back what you gave them. Weeks passed. Slowly, the ache dulled. I didn't post about it, didn't rant, didn't beg the universe for closure. I just rebuilt, quietly. One night, after a long day, I stood on my balcony, watching city lights blink like tired eyes. I realized I hadn't thought of him in hours. That felt like victory. I thought back to all the little sacrifices I'd made, the nights I stayed up waiting for him, the dinners I canceled for his emergencies, the weekends I spent fixing what he broke. I'd mistaken martyrdom for love. Now, sitting in that silence, I began learning a different kind of love, the kind you give to yourself when nobody else does. A few weeks later, Mara called. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Better than I thought," I said honestly. There was a pause. "Good. Just so you know, Cody's been posting pictures. Him and Layla. All smiles." I felt a tiny twist in my chest, but it passed. Let him. That's the life he wanted. After hanging up, I deleted every photo we had. Not in anger, just release. That night, I finally slept through the night for the first time in months. When I woke, sunlight touched my face through the curtains, gentle instead of cruel. For the first time, I didn't feel dread about the day ahead. I brewed coffee, opened my window, and whispered almost to myself, "Let him chase excitement. I'll choose peace." And that was how the silence began to heal me. Healing didn't arrive like a sunrise. It crept in quietly, almost unnoticed, through small, ordinary moments. At first, I thought I was just surviving. But somewhere between the sleepless nights and the early gym mornings, something began to shift. I wasn't Vivian the girlfriend anymore. I was just Vivian Deshotel. And for the first time in years, that was enough. 3 months had passed since Cody left. The apartment didn't feel haunted anymore. The silence had turned into a kind of peace. I'd developed routines that were fully mine. Coffee on the balcony before work. Evening walks by the river with my headphones in. Weekends hiking nearby trails, watching the horizon stretch wider than my memories of him. The gym, which once felt like punishment, had become therapy. Each rep, each breath reminded me that I could carry my own weight literally and emotionally. At work, I'd been given a new project, managing a logistics contract for a national client. It was demanding, but I thrived on it. The late nights, the spreadsheets, the problem solving, it all made sense, unlike the chaos I'd left behind. One Friday, after a flawless presentation, my manager smiled and said, "You've really stepped up lately, Vivian. Ever thought about team lead?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. I was too used to being overlooked, the quiet, dependable one. But I found myself smiling. I'd love that. That evening, I treated myself to dinner alone. A tiny Italian restaurant tucked between old bookshops. A woman eating alone might have looked lonely, but I felt serene. Across the room, a couple laughed loudly, feeding each other bites of pasta. The old me would have felt envious. The new me just smiled and thought, I hope it lasts for them. A week later, I went to a networking event my coworker insisted on. Normally, I hated those things, the small talk, the forced smiles, but something in me said, go. That's where I met Daryl Lynn. He wasn't loud or flashy, just calm, the kind of calm that doesn't need to prove itself. He worked as a graphic designer for a nearby firm, creating product visuals for campaigns I'd seen on billboards but never noticed consciously. He was standing by the coffee table, stirring sugar into his drink like it was the most delicate task in the world. I said something awkward about caffeine dependency, and he laughed. Not the polite kind, real laughter, low and warm. We ended up talking for over an hour about art deadlines, hiking favorite podcasts. There was no spark of chaos, no instant obsession, just an ease I hadn't felt in years. When he asked for my number, I hesitated. Old fear flickered. What if this turns into another slow betrayal? But something about him, maybe the patience in his eyes, made me nod. Our first date was simple. Dinner at a quiet cafe, then a walk by the river. He didn't try to impress me, didn't dominate the conversation. He just listened. When I mentioned how I'd once been told I was boring, he chuckled softly. Then I guess I'm boring too. I'd take calm over chaos any day. That night I cried in my car, not because I was sad, but because someone had finally made peace sound like a compliment. As weeks passed, I started noticing small signs of healing. I stopped checking social media for traces of Cody. I laughed without forcing it. My shoulders no longer tensed when someone mentioned love. One Saturday, Daryl and I went hiking on the same ridge I'd once stood on alone months before. The sky was wide and forgiving. As we reached the top, he looked out and said, "Funny thing about climbing halfway through, you always think you'll never make it. But once you're here, the pain feels worth it." I smiled. That's exactly what healing feels like. He turned to me, studying my face. "Then you've climbed a long way, haven't you?" I didn't answer, but I think he saw the truth in my eyes. That night, lying in bed, I replayed everything that had happened since the breakup. The humiliation, the loneliness, the quiet victories. I used to think Cody took something from me, but really he just left space I never knew I needed. A space for self-respect, for growth, for peace. For me. One evening I met Mara for coffee. She smiled as I walked in. "You look different, happier." "I am," I said, stirring my drink. "It's not perfect, but it's real." She hesitated before saying, "I ran into Cody last week." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, he's still with Layla. Looks rough, though. Thinner. Stressed. Apparently they're fighting a lot." I just nodded. "That's unfortunate." Mara leaned forward. "You really don't care." I thought about it honestly. The old me would have said yes, pretended to be over it. But the truth was, stranger, I didn't feel anything. "No," I said softly. "I hope he figures himself out. But I'm done carrying his lessons." Mara grinned. "Now that's growth." I laughed. It felt genuine. Later, walking home under the amber streetlights, I realized something profound. I didn't want revenge or closure or even an apology. What I wanted was what I'd already built, peace that didn't depend on anyone else. Love didn't need to be fireworks. It could be steady like a heartbeat. Quiet, but alive. I was no longer the woman who stood humiliated in a bar. I was the woman who left and learned to never apologize for being calm. Karma doesn't arrive with thunder. It drips steady and silent through the cracks people carve for themselves. 6 months had passed since I'd last heard Cody's name. By then, my world felt completely new, structured, peaceful, balanced. Work was thriving. I'd been promoted to team lead after the successful logistics campaign. I'd redecorated my apartment, new curtains, new couch, new energy. Even the air smelled different, lighter somehow. And then one evening, Mara texted me, "Hey, not that you care, but you should probably hear this." Attached was a blurry photo from a mutual friend's Instagram story, Cody and Layla at a party. He looked disheveled, eyes, unfocused shirt, half untucked. She was dancing on a table holding a bottle like a trophy. I didn't reply, just stared at it for a long moment before setting my phone face down. I'd expected indifference. What I felt was something colder, pity. Over the next few weeks, updates trickled in uninvited but unavoidable. From coworkers who still followed the same social circles, from Mara, from whispers at gatherings I never asked about. Apparently, Cody had lost his job after missing too many deadlines. Creative burnout, he called it online, but people said it was more like constant hangovers. Layla, once the life of every party, had started freelancing, posting about self-branding and freedom, but really it was just code for no stable income. Friends who used to envy them were now rolling their eyes at their messy public drama. There were stories of screaming fights outside clubs, cryptic posts about trust issues deleted, pictures, followed by desperate reconciliations. Every story sounded the same, chaos seeking chaos. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd called me boring. Now his exciting life was burning down one hangover at a time. I didn't rejoice, but I won't lie. I allowed myself quiet satisfaction. Not the vengeful kind, more like the feeling of watching a storm move on without you. At work, my team celebrated another successful quarter. My boss toasted to leadership under pressure, and my chest warmed with pride. Not because of the recognition, but because it had nothing to do with him. No Cody, no shadow, just me. Around that time, Daryl and I had grown closer. We weren't the kind of couple who needed grand declarations. It was small things. Him remembering my favorite tea brand. Me leaving sticky notes on his fridge with doodles of cats holding coffee cups. Us sitting in silence that wasn't awkward. One night after dinner, he said, I used to think calm relationships were boring. Turns out it's the chaos that's exhausting." I smiled. Someone once told me that peace is for people who've never felt passion. He raised an eyebrow. "And you believe them?" I shook my head slowly. For a while. Until I realized peace doesn't mean empty. It means full of everything that doesn't hurt. Daryl reached across the table and took my hand. Then I'll take full over fire any day. In that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. But life loves symmetry, and the past loves showing up just when you think you've outrun it. One rainy afternoon, I got a call from Mara again. Her tone was hesitant. "Vivian, I don't want to stir things up, but Cody, he's in a bad spot." I sighed. What happened? Layla dumped him. Apparently, she caught him flirting with someone else at one of those events. They had a huge scene. He's been couch hopping since. Lost his car, too. I let out a slow exhale. That sounds rough. Mara paused, almost expecting me to say more. When I didn't, she added softly, "He asked about you, you know. Said he regrets everything." I smiled faintly. Regret isn't the same as change. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed him, but because I finally saw the full picture. Cody hadn't changed. He'd just run out of people willing to carry his weight. And yet for years, I'd blamed myself for not being enough, for not being exciting, spontaneous, wild. But all along, he wasn't looking for excitement. He was looking for permission to stay irresponsible. I whispered into the dark, almost laughing at the absurdity. He called me boring, while living a life that never moved forward. For the first time, it felt funny instead of painful. Weeks later, while scrolling through social media during lunch, I stumbled on a photo someone had tagged him in. Cody behind a bar counter. Same neon blue lights I recognized instantly. The Harbor Bar. The same place where he'd humiliated me. Now he worked there. The irony stung and soothed all at once. Life had come full circle without my help. Later that evening, Daryl noticed me staring off. "Rough day," he asked, pouring tea. I smiled faintly. Not rough, just poetic. He chuckled. "That sounds like something I should be worried about." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's just karma taking its time." He handed me my mug, eyes warm. Then cheers to patience. I raised the cup, meeting his gaze. To peace. That night before bed, I thought about how far I'd come. The woman who once begged for scraps of affection was gone. In her place stood someone who no longer needed to prove her worth through someone else's chaos. Karma wasn't revenge. It was simply truth returning home. And mine had finally found its way back. A year. That's how long it had been since that night at the Harbor Bar, the night I'd been told I was embarrassing in front of strangers. Funny how pain stretches time. Back then, every day felt endless. Now, standing on the other side of it, I barely recognized the woman I used to be. The scars had faded, the noise had quieted, and in its place was something softer, steadier peace. It was a Friday evening when Daryl suggested, "Let's go out tonight, somewhere with live music." I smiled, already halfway into pajamas. "You mean outside with people?" He grinned. "I'll take that as a maybe." He pulled up a list on his phone. "There's this place downtown, Harbor Bar. Supposedly great music." For a moment, I froze. The name hit like a ghost tapping on my shoulder. Daryl noticed. "You okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, let's go." Because avoiding ghosts doesn't make them disappear. Facing them does. The bar hadn't changed much. Same neon signs, same buzz of laughter and bass. But I had changed. No trembling hands. No need to look small. Daryl's hand rested lightly on my lower back as we walked in. Warm grounding, not possessive. The kind of touch that said, "I'm here if you need me, but I know you don't." We found a table near the back. I exhaled slowly, soaking in the music, the chatter, the way people leaned too close when they laughed. It was surreal returning to the site of my public undoing as the calmest version of myself. 10 minutes later, our waitress approached. I looked up, and the world seemed to pause. Layla. Her hair was shorter now, her eyeliner smudged, like she'd given up on pretending to be perfect. The glow she used to wear like perfume was gone, replaced by exhaustion. For a split second, I thought she wouldn't recognize me, but then her expression faltered. "Vivian," she said softly. "Wow. Hey." I managed a polite smile. "Hi, Layla." Her eyes darted to Daryl. "You look different." "I am," I said simply. She swallowed, nodding too fast. "That's great. Really." Daryl, oblivious to the history, smiled kindly. "Nice to meet you. Can we get 2 IPAs and the nachos, please?" "Of course," Layla murmured. "I'll get that started." She walked off quickly, her shoulders slumped under invisible weight. I watched her go, not out of cruelty, just curiosity. The woman who once stood next to Cody mocking my quietness was now serving drinks in the same place they'd humiliated me. Karma wasn't just poetic, it was painfully symmetrical. I was still processing when another voice came from behind me. "Vivian." I turned. "Cody." He looked thinner, older. The boyish charm had evaporated, leaving a man who looked permanently tired. His hands were rough, his shirt slightly stained, his name tag crooked. "Hey," he said, voice uncertain. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." I smiled politely, the kind of smile you give to a stranger who's mistaken you for someone else. "Hi, Cody." He glanced at Daryl, then back to me. "So this is my fiancé," I said gently, the word rolling off my tongue like music. Cody blinked. "Fiancé." Daryl reached out, shaking his hand. "Good to meet you, man." Cody's fingers twitched, grip weak. He looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. "Wow, you moved on fast." I tilted my head. "No, I healed fast. There's a difference." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I've been meaning to call you," he said finally. "I made a lot of mistakes." I nodded. "I know. I thought maybe we could talk, just clear the air." Daryl looked at me silent, trusting me to handle it. I met Cody's gaze, calm but unwavering. "Cody, you humiliated me here. You said I was boring, that I held you back. And now standing here, I realize I didn't lose anything. I just stopped trying to save someone who didn't want to grow." He flinched. "You don't have to rub it in." "I'm not," I said softly. "I just don't need to carry your apology. I let go a long time ago." He laughed once bitterly. "She left me, you know. Layla. After everything." "I know," I said. "And I hope someday you learn to stop choosing storms and start building shelter." His lips parted, but no words came. Behind him, Layla was watching, tray in hand, eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and regret. Daryl reached for my hand. I stood. "We should get going. The music's too loud anyway." As we passed Cody, I paused for a heartbeat, meeting his eyes one last time. "You once said I was embarrassing," I said quietly. "Turns out peace just looked unfamiliar to you." Then I walked out. Outside, the air was cool, the city humming softly around us. Daryl squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I smiled genuinely. Better than okay. We walked down the street, laughter from the bar fading behind us. For a long moment, I thought about how endings don't always come with fireworks or final words. Sometimes they arrive as silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Cody's laughter used to echo in my head like a wound. Now it was just background noise from a story that no longer belonged to me. I looked at Daryl, who was talking about weekend plans, his face lit by the streetlights. My heart felt steady. "Hey," I said suddenly. He turned, smiling. "Yeah, thank you for choosing peace with me." He chuckled. "It's the best kind of adventure, isn't it?" I nodded, glancing once at the reflection of the neon sign behind us. Harbor Bar, its light flickering, weakly fading against the night. I whispered more to myself than him. He called me boring. But maybe boring is just what peace looks like to people who've never earned it. And with that, I walked forward, hand in hand, with a man who never needed saving, leaving the ghosts exactly where they belonged behind me. My name is Rebecca Stone. I'm 28 years old, and 6 months ago, I learned that love can die in silence long before it ever breaks in half. If you'd asked anyone who knew us, they would have said Austin and I were perfect together. College sweethearts who beat the odds, the kind of couple people toasted to at weddings. But what they didn't see was the slow unraveling, thread by thread, underneath all that harmony. We met in senior year. He was charming in the effortless way that drew people in, all soft eyes and messy hair. I was practical, the planner, the listener. Together we felt balanced. I helped him finish his thesis when he almost dropped out. He said I made him want to be better. Back then I believed love was about helping someone become their best self. I didn't realize that sometimes in the process you forget your own. After graduation, we moved into a tiny apartment with crooked floors and one window that jammed every summer. It wasn't much, but it felt like ours. We split groceries, decorated thrift store furniture, and talked about the future. When he lost his first job, I covered the rent. When he said he felt directionless, I built him a schedule, printed job listings, and told him we'd figure it out. And we did. Or at least I thought we did. When his friends suggested he join a new gym to reset, I was thrilled for him. He needed something to lift him out of that fog. At first it worked. He came home glowing, talking about new routines, new goals, and about her Tara, his trainer. "She's just helping with form," he said the first time I asked who she was. I didn't question it. Why would I? He'd never given me a reason to doubt him. But weeks turned into months, and I started noticing changes. He'd come home later, shower first thing, and scroll through his phone with a half smile he didn't try to hide. I'd catch faint traces of unfamiliar perfume on his hoodie, floral, expensive, definitely not mine. Still, I rationalized it away. That's what you do when you're scared to see the truth. You build stories that make the discomfort easier to live with. The first real argument came on a Sunday morning. He was getting dressed, wearing cologne he hadn't used in years. Going to the gym again, I asked. Yeah, he said without meeting my eyes. It's been every day this week. I'm finally consistent. Isn't that what you wanted? His tone made me sound like an obstacle instead of a partner. I swallowed the hurt, smiled, and told him to have fun. That's when I noticed love doesn't always leave with a bang. Sometimes it tiptoes out while you're pretending everything's fine. A few nights later, I decided to do something spontaneous, something that might remind us who we were. I booked a table at his favorite restaurant, the one where we celebrated his first job offer years ago. I bought a new dress, even left work early to pick up his favorite wine. I remember humming as I climbed the stairs to our apartment, balancing the wine bottle and takeout bag. The hallway smelled like rain and somebody's laundry detergent. I unlocked the door, quietly planning to surprise him. What I found instead made the world tilt. At first I thought the noises were from the TV, the low rhythm of laughter, the creak of the bed frame. Then I saw them. Tara's hair spilled across our sheets. Austin's back arched above her. Both of them so lost in each other, they didn't even hear me drop the bag. For a moment I froze. It wasn't rage that hit first. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, and almost merciful. All the small doubts I'd buried bloomed into something undeniable. I could have screamed. I could have thrown something. Instead, I just said quietly, Austin. He turned, startled disbelief, flashing into guilt, then defiance. Rebecca, this isn't... Don't I cut him off? Just don't. Tara scrambled to pull the sheet around herself. I should go. Please do, I said, voice trembling but steady enough. Austin stood half-dressed, trying to reach for me. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. There was a beat of silence. Then something ugly flickered in his eyes, the kind of arrogance people use when they're too cowardly to apologize. You've been so focused on responsibility, Rebecca. You plan, you manage, you control. Tara, she makes me feel alive. She's spontaneous. You're safe. Safe. The word landed harder than the betrayal itself. I wanted to say 1,000 things that love isn't supposed to be a thrill ride, that safety isn't a flaw, but none of it would have mattered. I just pointed at the door. Get out. He didn't move. You're really just ending it like this. I'm not ending anything, Austin. You already did. Tara slipped out first, clutching her clothes, avoiding my eyes. Austin followed, muttering something about how I'd driven him away. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood there in silence, surrounded by the faint smell of sweat and cologne and betrayal. That night I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't text my friends or blast sad songs. I sat on the couch until morning light crept through the blinds, staring at nothing. It's strange you think the worst part of heartbreak is the pain. It's not. It's the stillness that follows when you realize the person you trusted most has already been gone for months. You just hadn't caught up yet. As dawn painted the walls pale gold, I whispered to no one, I'm done. It wasn't a declaration of strength. It was exhaustion finally giving itself permission to stop fighting. Tomorrow, I told myself I'll start cleaning up the pieces. But that night, I just sat there learning what it feels like when love ends quietly. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the apartment looked different. The walls that once felt warm now carried echoes. The scent of betrayal doesn't just fade, it lingers in the corners, in the sheets, in the air you breathe. I couldn't stay there much longer, not without doing something. So I called my sister. Natalie, it's over, I said, the moment she picked up. My voice was flat, too calm. Rebecca. What happened? He cheated, with someone from his gym. There was a long pause, then her quiet, steady reply. I'm coming over. She showed up 30 minutes later, still in her work clothes, hair barely brushed, eyes full of fire. The first thing she did was pull me into a hug. I didn't realize how much I needed it until I started shaking. Oh, honey, she murmured. He doesn't deserve your tears. I'm not crying, I said, though my voice broke halfway through. Natalie didn't push. She just looked around the apartment, the half-empty closet, the untouched dinner from last night still sitting on the counter, the wine bottle unopened, and said, let's pack his things. So we did. It took hours. Every shirt, every mug, every memory we shoved into boxes felt like a piece of our life I had to amputate. I found his cologne under the sink, the one I used to love. I sprayed it once into the air and nearly gagged. Natalie took it from my hand and dropped it in the trash. Don't look for closure in trash, she said quietly. Just take out the trash. We found his gym receipts, 2 fancy restaurants, movie tickets, and once a hotel bill. The dates lined up perfectly with the nights he claimed to be staying late at work. How long, I whispered. Long enough for him to stop pretending, Natalie said. By the time we sealed the last box, the sun was setting. Natalie wiped her forehead and studied me. You're handling this too well, she said. I'd be throwing things. What's the point? I replied. He already took enough from me. I'm not giving him my rage, too. That night she stayed over. We ordered takeout and ate it in silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy but safe. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through his social media to see if he'd posted something stupid. I just sat on the balcony watching the city lights blink below me. It's strange how small your world becomes after betrayal. Everything you thought was solid suddenly feels paper thin. I thought about the early years, how he'd text me goodnight every single evening, how he once said, "You make chaos feel like home." I wondered when that changed, when I stopped being home and started being habit. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store and bought a new lock. The guy behind the counter made small talk, but I wasn't listening. My thoughts were replaying Austin's face, not the one from the night before, but from months earlier when I'd caught him looking bored during dinner, eyes already somewhere else. Maybe that's when he left. The body stays long after the love is gone. That evening, Natalie helped me change the lock. It's symbolic, she said with a grin, twisting the screwdriver. New lock, new life. New life, I echoed. It sounded distant, but I held on to it anyway. When she left, I stood by the window holding his spare key, the one he'd always kept just in case. I placed it on the table, stared at it for a full minute, then opened the window and tossed it into the alley. It hit the pavement with a small metallic clink. That sound small, sharp, final felt like freedom. That night, I turned my phone off for the first time in years. I didn't want apologies, explanations, or pity texts. I didn't want to hear, "It's not what it looks like." I just wanted quiet, and I got it. But quiet can be deceptive. It feels peaceful, but it's really just emptiness with better manners. The days that followed blurred together. I woke up, went to work, came home, and stared at the spot where his shoes used to be by the door. Every time I walked past that empty space, it whispered, "You gave everything." He gave excuses. 2 weeks later, I ran into one of his friends at a coffee shop. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me. "Rebecca." "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "How are you holding up?" "Fine." I lied. "Look, I don't know if I should say this, but Austin's already posting pictures with Tara at the gym, at bars, everywhere." I smiled a small, tired smile. Then I guess they deserve each other. It wasn't bitterness. It was relief. Because that meant I was right to let go. That night, as I sat by the window again, I whispered something new into the quiet. I forgive myself. Not for trusting him, that wasn't a crime, but for staying too long in a love that had already expired. Tomorrow, I decided I'd start rebuilding. Not to prove anything to him, just to remind myself I still could. The first thing I did was rearrange the furniture. It sounds silly, but when your world falls apart, moving a couch feels like taking control again. I dragged the sofa away from the wall, flipped the rug, changed the position of the bookshelf. By the time I was done, my arms ached, but the air felt lighter, different. It wasn't our apartment anymore. It was mine. The days that followed became a quiet routine of healing I didn't plan for. Wake up, run, work, sleep, repeat. But under that repetition, something was shifting. I joined a gym, not his, a different one across town. The first few times, I could barely walk on the treadmill without feeling exposed. I half expected to see him there, smirking, judging, reminding me of what I wasn't. But he never came, and after a while, I realized I wasn't doing it for him at all. I was doing it for the version of myself I'd abandoned. The gym became a metaphor, sweating out what no longer served me. Every drop of sweat felt like another piece of him leaving my system. At work, people started asking questions. "Where's Austin been lately? Are you two still together?" I'd smile politely. "No, we're not." Some people looked shocked. Others pretended not to be curious. But I didn't explain. I owed no one the story of how my life fell apart. Then came the messages. Mutual friends checking in. Rachel, one of Austin's old classmates, texted me, "I heard what happened. Don't let it define you, Rebecca. He's not doing as well as he pretends." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, "I'm not pretending either." That night, I sat on my balcony again, the same one where I'd eaten takeout with Natalie, and thought about how quiet healing really is. It doesn't look like a big victory. It looks like cooking dinner for one without crying, like going to bed early without checking your phone, like breathing without the weight of someone else's absence pressing against your ribs. Still, there were moments of weakness. I'd see couples on the street and feel a sharp twist of envy. I'd smell his cologne on a stranger and lose my breath for a second. But then I'd remember I already survived the worst part. A month after the breakup, I decided to take a weekend trip. Just me. No plans. No one waiting at the other end. I drove to the coast, checked into a small seaside inn, and spent 2 days walking barefoot along the shoreline. There, in the soft rhythm of waves, I realized something profound. He hadn't broken me. He'd just forced me to meet the version of myself that didn't need saving. When I came back home, Natalie noticed the difference immediately. "You look peaceful," she said. "I think I am." "You sure it's not just exhaustion?" she teased. "Maybe both," I said, smiling for the first time in a long while. That night, as we ate dinner, she said something that stuck with me. "You know, Rebecca, some people fall in love with how much you give. But when you stop giving, they realize they never loved you just the version that made their life easier." I thought about that for days, because that's exactly what Austin did. After that, I began saying no more often at work, with friends, even with family. I stopped apologizing for being tired. I stopped chasing people who only called when they needed comfort. For once, I started choosing myself. And then just when I began to believe I'd moved past it, life decided to test me. It started with a voice message. Unknown number, 11:47 p.m. "Rebecca, it's me. Please don't hang up. I made a mistake. Tara. She's not who I thought she was. I miss you. I can't sleep. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was no part of me that wanted to press play again. I deleted it, no hesitation. 2 days later, another message came. Different number, same voice. "Please, Rebecca, I need you. I'm not okay." This time I blocked it. And that's when I realized something even deeper. The version of me who once would have rushed to rescue him no longer existed. She died the night I found him in our bed. Now I wasn't his savior. I was his consequence. Weeks turned into a quiet kind of peace. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I filled the empty wall above the couch with my own art streaks of blue and gold that looked like chaos trying to find beauty. It wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But it was mine. That's when I began to notice the world again, the way the morning light hit my curtains. The smell of coffee, the sound of life outside my window. I wasn't healed yet, but I was becoming someone new. Someone lighter, stronger, softer in ways that mattered. And though I didn't know it yet, that version of me, the one learning to breathe again, was about to be tested in ways I didn't expect. Because ghosts have a way of coming back when you finally learn to live without them. The first time I saw his name again, it was on Rachel's lips. I was at the grocery store halfway through the produce aisle, debating between 2 bruised apples when she appeared behind me. "Rebecca." I turned, startled. "Rachel." "Hey, it's been a while." She hesitated, then smiled the way people do when they're about to deliver news they shouldn't. "How have you been?" "Good," I said automatically. "You fine? Busy? Listen. I've seen Austin." Just like that, his name dropped into the air like a cold coin into water. "He's not doing well," Rachel continued. "Tara's been intense, controlling. She checks his phone, his friends, everything. I think she even hit him once." I stayed quiet, adjusting the apples in my hands. "I'm sorry," Rachel said quickly. "I shouldn't have brought it up." "It's okay," I said. "You didn't." She watched me for a moment. "He asks about you sometimes." "He shouldn't," I said softly. That was the end of it. But the mention lingered in my mind for days afterward, circling like a restless bird. Not because I wanted him back, but because I'd once loved someone who was now trapped in the same kind of toxicity he'd chosen over me. And then the calls began. Blocked numbers, late nights, the sound of his voice on voicemail, soft, desperate, almost childlike. "Rebecca, I'm sorry. You were right. She's not what I thought. I just need 5 minutes, please." The first time I deleted it. The second I blocked the number. The third I stopped answering unknown calls altogether. But ghosts don't fade just because you close the door. They find cracks to slip through. One afternoon I was at work when reception buzzed me. "There's someone here asking for you," they said. "Who?" "He says his name is Austin." For a moment everything went still. I looked at my reflection in the computer screen, my hair pulled back, my face calm. "You can tell him I'm not available. He says it's urgent." Of course he does. They always do. I took the elevator down anyway. Call it curiosity closure, or maybe one last test from the universe. He was in the lobby wearing the same jacket he'd once worn to our anniversary dinner, except now it hung loose on him. His eyes were red, his hands shaking slightly as he shoved them into his pockets. Rebecca, he breathed, as if saying my name hurt. You look different. I am different, I said. He tried to smile the same smile that used to make me forgive him before I even knew what I was forgiving. I made a mistake, he said quickly. Tara, she's destroying me. I should have never left. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I crossed my arms. No, Austin, I wasn't the best thing that happened to you. I was the easiest, the safest, the one who cleaned up your messes so you could pretend you weren't standing in one. His jaw tightened. Can we just talk 5 minutes? That's all. We are talking, I said. Like adults. I'm an adult who knows her worth. You're an adult who made a choice. He looked away as if the truth was too bright to stare at. I don't know how to fix it. That's because it's not mine to fix anymore. When I turned to leave, he reached for my wrist instinctively, a small, desperate gesture. But even that felt wrong now. I pulled back gently. Don't, I said. Please don't. The look on his face then wasn't anger. It was something worse, realization. He finally understood there was no version of us left to salvage. He started, voice trembling. I miss who we were. I met his eyes and said, then maybe you should have protected who we were instead of destroying it. He didn't follow me when I walked away. That night I came home and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of the fridge, the sound of rain against the window. I thought I'd feel relief, but what I felt was heavier compassion. Not for him, but for the version of myself who once would have stayed. The calls continued for another week, but I never picked up. Eventually they stopped. In the silence that followed, I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't letting someone back in. It's closing the door without needing them to knock again. I deleted the final voicemail without listening to it, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of him. When I woke up the next morning, the sun spilled across my bed, clean sheets, quiet apartment air that finally felt mine again. I made coffee, opened the window, and whispered into the light, I survived you. And somewhere deep down, I knew that wasn't bitterness. It was victory. 2 months after that last voicemail, I stopped glancing at my phone every time it buzzed. The silence that once felt heavy now felt earned like peace I'd paid for with every sleepless night. I wasn't looking for anything new. I wasn't looking at all. That's probably why I noticed him. It was at a bookstore one Saturday afternoon, the kind of quiet place that smells like old paper and rain. I was crouched in front of the fiction shelf, scanning for a title I'd read about when someone beside me reached for the same book. Sorry, he said, pulling his hand back. You go ahead. I looked up. He had warm eyes and a gentle smile, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything. It's fine, I said, handing it to him. You take it. I was just curious. Only if we agree to share it, he replied. I'll read it first, then lend it to you. Book Karma. That was how I met Thomas. It started with a conversation about novels and ended with 2 coffees at the corner cafe. He was easy to talk to, not because he tried hard, but because he didn't try at all. No performance, no carefully curated charm, just quiet confidence. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other at the same cafe at the market once, even at the park where I went running. He joked that I was following him. I told him he needed to pick less convenient places to haunt. We started meeting on purpose after that. There was no rush, no desperate spark, no grand confessions, just laughter, long talks, and an ease that felt foreign but right. He didn't ask about Austin, and I didn't offer. Somehow he understood that silence could also be healing. One evening after dinner, we walked by the river. The city lights shimmered on the surface like pieces of broken glass, turned beautiful. He said, You're different from most people I meet. How so? You don't fill the silence. You listen to it. I smiled. I had to learn to like it. He didn't press for details. He just nodded, as if that was enough. That night when I got home, I realized my cheeks hurt from smiling. It had been a long time since that happened without effort. Then, one evening, months after the breakup, the ghost came knocking again. Literally. It was raining hard. I was cooking dinner when the doorbell rang. Thomas was there, stirring soup in my kitchen, his sleeves rolled up. When I opened the door, I froze. Austin stood there, drenched, thinner than I remembered, eyes hollow. For a heartbeat, all the air left the room. He looked past me, saw Thomas, and something in his face cracked. I see you've moved on, he said quietly. I have, I answered. He stepped closer, voice shaking. I left her. Tara, she's gone. I made a mistake, Rebecca. I know that now. I held the door, not opening it any wider. Go home, Austin. Can't we at least talk about what? About us. About how things used to be. Behind me, Thomas didn't move or interrupt. He just stood quietly, letting me hold my own ground. Austin, I said, my voice calm but firm. You told me once I was everything you settled for, not what you dreamed about. Remember. His lips parted, no words coming out. Well, I continued. I'm not settling anymore either. He tried again, desperation leaking through. Please, Rebecca, you don't understand how bad it got. I thought I wanted passion. I wanted excitement. But she destroyed me. I swallowed hard. And now you want me to save you from the storm you chose. Tears started in his eyes. I was wrong. No, I said softly. You were honest. You just didn't realize I'd finally believe you. He looked over my shoulder at Thomas, then back at me. Who is he? Someone who doesn't need to break me to see my worth. There was nothing cruel in my voice, only truth, the kind that doesn't need to shout to hurt. Austin stood there soaked and silent as thunder rolled in the distance. I could see the moment he understood. There was no doorway left for him to step through. Rebecca, he whispered, what am I supposed to do now? Figure it out, I said, like the rest of us. He didn't argue. He just nodded once slowly and turned to leave. When I closed the door, Thomas was still standing there, quiet, respectful. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded. Yes. For the first time, I think I really am. He reached for my hand, and I let him. His palm was warm, grounding steady. Neither of us said anything more. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace that didn't depend on anyone else. That night, as I drifted to sleep beside Thomas, I thought about how love can destroy you and how sometimes, if you're patient, it can rebuild you too. The difference is who stands beside you when the storm returns. 6 months later, I woke to the sound of sunlight. That's what it felt like, warm, unhurried, patient. Thomas was still asleep beside me, his arm draped over my waist, his breathing steady. There was no rush, no tension, no ache to be fixed. Just quiet, peaceful, real. Sometimes I still catch myself flinching at that quiet waiting for the next disaster. The text, the betrayal, the twist that used to come right when I thought I could finally breathe. But it doesn't come anymore. I think that's how you know you've healed, when peace stops feeling like a warning. Thomas stirs, half awake. You're thinking too loud, he murmurs into the pillow. I laugh softly. Force of habit. He smiles without opening his eyes. Want coffee, I'll make it, I whisper, kissing his shoulder before slipping out of bed. As I move through my apartment, the morning light hits the walls I once thought would always remind me of Austin. Now they're covered with paintings I've made since then, ocean skies, the color of forgiveness. Over breakfast, Thomas scrolls through his phone. My friend's getting engaged, he says, showing me a picture. Good for them. Yeah, he's terrified. I grin. That's how you know it's real. He glances up at me. You ever think about us? I pause, not out of fear, but reflection. I do, but not with panic anymore. He nods, setting the phone down. Neither do I. We sit there for a while, not needing to fill the silence. I realize how different this love feels, not loud, not dramatic, not born out of chaos, just steady. And that steadiness used to scare me because I mistook quiet love for dull love. Austin had taught me to crave volatility, to chase validation disguised as passion. But Thomas taught me something else, that safety can be electric too when it's with the right person. After breakfast, I step out to the balcony, the same one I once sat on with tears in my eyes. The city hums below, alive but distant. I sip my coffee and think about the woman I used to be, the one who bent over backward to prove she was worthy, the one who thought love was something to earn, the one who begged for attention from someone who was already gone. She was young, hopeful, and heartbreakingly loyal. I don't hate her. I thank her, because she stayed long enough to teach me how to leave. A few weeks ago, Rachel called. She said Austin had moved back in with his parents. Tara had drained his savings, isolated him from his friends, and when he tried to leave, she became violent. He got out, but not without scars. I didn't ask for details. I didn't wish him well or ill. I just said, I hope he learned something from it. And I meant it, because that's what pain should do, teach not tether. I'm not writing this for revenge or pity or closure. I'm writing it for the version of myself and for anyone else who thinks being the safe one makes you unworthy of passion. It doesn't. I used to think love had to be loud to be real, that it had to hurt to mean something. But love isn't meant to consume you, it's meant to coexist with you. Austin once told me I was predictable, reliable, too safe. He was right. I am safe. I am reliable. I am steady. And someone who knows what love truly is will treasure those things, not run from them. Thomas thinks I'm exciting enough. He says my calm is what makes him feel alive. And for the first time, I believe him. The funny thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't end with revenge or regret. It ends quietly on an ordinary morning when you realize you haven't thought about the person who broke you in weeks. It ends when you stop looking at love as a test you can fail. I used to think Austin was the lesson, but he wasn't. I was. Because the greatest thing I learned was this: love doesn't make you whole, it meets you there. I take one last sip of coffee, let the breeze play with my hair, and smile. The city hums below, unaware of how much it's witnessed. I spent years trying to be enough for the wrong person, I whisper. Now I finally am for myself. And for the first time, it feels like enough.